Welcome, welcome to the Mind Fuck Podcast. Yay! Welcome once again, my friend. Thank you so much for taking time out to hang out with me. I'm truly grateful and appreciative. My name is Wanu Alishe, and sometimes I do go by Amazing Soul. Welcome once again to the Mind Fog Podcast. FCK stands for fun, compassion, and kindness. Now, we have like a tradition that we do on the show before we get right into today's episode, where I read out a list that I titled Reminders of Being Human. Is meant to serve as a reminder to myself and also to serve as a reminder to you on your journey. So I'm gonna read out the list before I actually start the show. All right. All right. Reminders to being human. Have fun along the journey. Show yourself compassion. Be kind to others. Being complex and being simple can hold true in the same breath. Stay curious. Hold space for pauses. Hold space for not knowing. Never underestimate the power of silence. Nature has a lot of wisdom. Pay attention. There is power in we than I. If nothing else makes sense, come back to love. Pain is our greatest teacher. And the very last one, never underestimate your ripple of existence. Welcome, once again, my friend. Let's get into the fun part of the show. Okay, so I want to start today's episode with something that might actually sound simple, but if you really sit with it, it's not simple at all. What does freedom actually feel like in your body? Know what freedom looks like on social media. Know what freedom sounds like in motivational speeches. Not even the idea of freedom. No, I what I'm referring to here is the physical sensation of freedom. I mean, if I asked you right now to close your eyes and feel into your body and imagine freedom, what would shift in your body, right? Would your shoulders drop? Would your jaw soften? Would your breath deepen? Or would nothing happen at all? Because for a long time on my journey, if you had asked me what freedom felt like, I would have given you a story. I would have said freedom is financial independence. I would have said freedom is working for yourself. I would have said freedom is transitioning out of the military. I would have said freedom is moving cities. I would have said freedom is not having to answer to anyone. And I'll tell you this right now, my friend. I have lived versions of all of that. But what I learned the hard way is this: external freedom and internal freedom, they're not the same thing. Let me take you back to a time in my life in 2022. I was just transitioning out of the army medically. On paper, that was freedom. I mean, I didn't have to wake up at 5 a.m. for morning informations. I didn't have to answer to a chain of command. I didn't have to hold in what I was feeling just to stay professional. I had what I thought I wanted. But in my body, though, the truth is I wasn't free. I was in chronic lower back pain. I was sleeping 2 to 4 hours a night. My nervous system was constantly on edge. My body didn't know that the environment had changed. And that realization was humbling as fuck. Because I started to realize something I had never fully understand before. Freedom is not a location. Freedom is a state of safety. And safety is felt in the body, not decided in the mind. You see, there was a season in my life where I thought freedom meant movement. I mean, I literally moved from Lagos to New York. From New York, I moved to North Carolina. I mean, I traveled a lot. I started over again from one city to another. I mean, I loved movement. I do love new experiences. I love to travel. But what I slowly began to notice was that I could change my entire environment and I could still feel tightness in my chest area. I still felt hyper alert. I still felt I had to prove something. I still felt like my body was constantly bracing. And bracing is the direct opposite of freedom. Because if your body is bracing, it is preparing you for impact. Because your body is not at ease, it's not open, so it's definitely not free. So I started asking a different question. So I started asking myself, instead of how do I become free, I started asking myself, what does safety feel like in my body? Because I realized my body did not need more achievement. My body needed more safety. And safety for me started in very small ways, micro moments. Not dramatic, not glamorous. I mean, safety for me started with noticing when my jaw was clenched, right? When my shoulders would tighten. I mean, when I was holding my breath while I was answering emails. Just noticing that. It started with moments like waking up around 2 or 3 a.m. And instead of getting angry at myself for not being able to sleep back, I mean, I'll place my hand on my chest and say internally, "You're safe, Wano. You're safe." That wasn't something I was taught growing up as a child. That wasn't something I practiced in the army. That wasn't something initially my nervous system was familiar with. But over time, right, something began to change. My body began to believe me. Freedom, I have learned over the years, feels like space. Freedom, space between stimulus and response, space between thought and reaction, space in your chest, space in your breath, right? I remember one very specific moment a few years ago. I was sitting outside just watching the trees move in the wind. There was no urgency, there was no mental checklist. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. My body wasn't trying to get anywhere. There was no internal rush. There was no subtle tension pulling me into the next thing. What I literally felt in that moment was just presence. And that's when it hit me. Ah, this is what freedom feels like. Not because I owned anything, not because I had achieved anything, but because my nervous system was embracing. You see, for a long time, my friend, I confused adrenaline with freedom. I mean, that rush of doing something bold, quitting something, starting something new, taking a risk. And I'll tell you this, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. But adrenaline is simply activation in your body. It's not the same as freedom. Freedom feels quieter. Freedom feels like your breath reaching your lower belly without effort. Freedom feels like your shoulders naturally resting down. Freedom feels like your body not scanning the room constantly for threat. Freedom feels like not performing. And not performing was a big one for me because a version of me learned very early on that being good meant being liked. And being liked meant being safe. And being safe meant survival. So I became hyper aware of people. I became hyper aware of reactions. I became hyper aware of tone shift. I mean, my nervous system was always calculating. I'll tell you this right now, that wasn't freedom. That was vigilance. Vigilance is exhausting as fuck. It is. I also noticed that every time I am speaking publicly, I realize something very interesting about myself. I'm always at eye level with the audience. I don't find myself on a raised stage. I always come down from the stage, and I noticed that I started asking myself why. And the answer that came up was simple. I don't like hierarchy. My body relaxes when I'm not above or below anyone. And freedom for me feels like equality in the nervous system. No one is a threat. No one needs to be impressed. No one needs to be conquered. Just one human being to another. There was also a time in my life when I thought freedom meant emotional detachment. I mean, not caring, not needing anyone, not depending on anyone. But beneath that, that was armor. And armor is heavy. It is because real freedom, I have learned over the years, it feels like openness without collapse. It's being able to care deeply without losing yourself in the process. It's being able to love without gripping. It's being able to let someone live without your entire identity shattering. And for me on my journey, that didn't happen overnight. No, it happened through hundreds of small reps of micro moments of safety. I mean, like when emotional charge will rise in my chest, that familiar tightening, and instead of reacting, I would pause. I would internally say to myself, I'm simply noticing the sensation in my chest. And give myself 90 seconds. No judging, no fixing, just noticing. That's it. And the beauty is over time, the intensity started to lessen, right? I started to realize the emotional charge didn't own me anymore. And that, my friend, felt like freedom. Freedom is not the absence of emotion. No. Freedom is the capacity to feel without being hijacked. It's the ability to stay. That is freedom. And regulation is not always calming. Sometimes it feels like sitting still while your body wants to run. But when you stay long enough, excuse me, something starts to rewire in your body. And your body starts to learn over time. We can actually survive this sensation. And when your body knows it can survive the sensation, you're no longer controlled by avoidance. Do you see? That's freedom. Let me tell you something else that actually surprised me on this journey. One of the deepest experiences of freedom I have ever felt came after years of sleep dysregulation. For a long time, I always forced my sleep. I mean, I always judged myself. I was always constantly fighting myself because I was running on like what 2 to 4 hours of sleep every night. And that came with a lot of frustration and a lot of self-criticism. And my body was in survival mode then. And the shift did not happen when I found the perfect routine. No. I mean, the shift started to happen over time when I stopped fighting my body. And I stopped telling myself, Wanu, why you like this? And I started saying, Wanu, what do you need to feel safe right now? Sometimes that meant getting up and just sitting quietly. Sometimes that meant adjusting the room. Sometimes it meant simply not judging myself for being awake at 2 or 3 a.m. And gradually, slowly, over months, right? From sleeping 4 hours, it became five. From five, became six. Eventually, became seven or sometimes eight. Not because I forced sleep, but because my nervous system started to trust me. Freedom felt like waking up and not being afraid of the night anymore. So, what does freedom actually feel like in the body, right? Freedom actually feels like not bracing. It feels like not performing. It feels like breath. It feels like your feet on the ground. It feels like being able to say no without panic. It feels like being able to say yes without resentment. True freedom feels like choice. Not reactive choice, but a conscious choice. And I'll say this, freedom feels boring. And that's another thing no one wants to talk about. Because if you grew up in chaos, calm can feel unfamiliar. Silence can feel uncomfortable. Peace can feel like something is missing in your life. Your body may equate intensity with aliveness. So when freedom first shows up, you might not even recognize it. It might feel like nothing dramatic is happening. And that's the point. Freedom is not fireworks, it's steadiness. I also want to say this. Freedom is layered. See, there are different layers of freedom. There is financial freedom, there's geographical freedom, there's relational freedom, and there's emotional freedom. And those layers don't always arrive together. And I have noticed that you can be financially free and emotionally trapped. You can be in a loving relationship and internally braced. You can be single and still not feel free. So the question now becomes less about your circumstances, right? And more about your internal posture. The question becomes, do you feel contracted internally or do you feel open? The question becomes, are you bracing constantly or are you breathing? You see, when I look at my own journey in my life, I mean, I moved from Lagos to the UK to New York, the Army, North Carolina. I started to see a pattern. For most of my life, I kept seeking freedom externally, and each move that I made taught me something. Each chapter expanded me in some way. But the real shift started to happen when I stopped running from my body, when I started to listen instead of overriding myself, when I stopped trying to win at life and just started to feel safe inside my body. That's when the real shift started to happen in my life. Freedom is not the absence of structure. It's the absence of internal threat. That is freedom. It's knowing you can sit in silence without needing to escape. It's knowing you can feel grief without drowning. It's knowing you can experience joy without waiting for it to be taken away. So I'll leave you this. I'll leave you with this, my friend. Instead of asking yourself, how do I become free? Try asking this question instead. What would make my body feel 5% safer right now? Not 100%, not perfect, just 5%. And maybe that 5% looks like unclenching your jaw. Maybe that 5% looks like stepping outside for 2 minutes. Maybe that 5% looks like putting your hand on your chest and telling yourself you're safe. Maybe that 5% looks like telling yourself the truth about something you've been avoiding. I'll tell you this, my friend, freedom grows in micro moments. It grows in nervous system trust. It grows in true embodied honesty. And the beautiful part about this journey is you don't have to earn it. You don't have to prove yourself into it. You don't have to escape into it. No, you build it cumulatively, one safe moment at a time. And over time, those moments stack up until one day you probably find yourself outside watching trees move, and you realize your body's not trying to get anywhere. You're simply just here existing as a human being, breathing. You notice that you're not bracing. And I feel like that might be the most honest definition of freedom there is. I want to thank you so much for being here, my friend. I want to thank you for listening. But most importantly, I'm sending you so much love from my heart to yours. Thank you.